Hi everybody, it's Couple Indemnity. We are a film podcast about the love of cinema by two very dedicated film fans. I'm Hal, and as ever this week I'm joined by Izzy.
Hi everyone.
Well, my selection this week was a big one. Brief Encounter. I had been so looking forward to showing you this film. Comes with a big reputation, rated as one of the biggest British movies of all time, and most loved and most enduring romances on screen. What was your awareness and prior expectations coming to this movie?
Well, we actually saw a play of Still Life, which is the original version of the story. God, like 4 years ago now. In a very... Well, it was a bit of a funny format, wasn't it? Because they performed it in the cafe of the theatre.
Yes, at the Mill at Sonning.
Near Reading.
Yeah, and they kind of converted the bar area into the station cafe.
So I believe I got us those tickets for your birthday or for Christmas or something, because I knew you were a fan of the film.
Yeah.
Even though I'd never seen it until yesterday. So I was vaguely aware of the storyline because of the play version, but I knew there was some changes when it came to the film.
But as I said, I mean, this is obviously regarded as one of the most revered romances and romantic films of all time. Two unforgettable performances that we have to talk about in detail here. But it's also a film that feels so undeniably old-fashioned of such a former era, and also so undeniably English. I think I lose count of how many cups of tea were ordered in the various cafe scenes. And talking about Still Life, and I think you really see its stage roots on screen and its Noel Coward influences. Did you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. In the kind of it's not even really limited setting, because you do see other areas where the play is like everything is set in that cafe and you just see them in that one setting. But no, definitely in the kind of, I guess, the dialogue, quite heavy dialogue scenes.
I mean, it's a mostly studio-bound film, because even the exterior shots are all filmed at Denham Studios. So it does feel... You wouldn't call it limited, as you say, but it's not...
Extravagant.
It's not extravagant in its locations. Absolutely not. It is very much a performance-based film, heavily weighted and invested in the emotions on show here. But I think we get a lot. We'll talk about it in depth, but I think we get a lot of the early touches of David Lean's incredible eye for cinematography and a very impactful camera shot here that we're going to talk about in future films that we'll cover on the podcast. Let's break for the trailer now, and we'll be back to talk about the plot.
I didn't think such violent things could happen to ordinary people. It all started on an ordinary day, in the most ordinary place in the world, the refreshment room at Milford Junction.
My name's Alec Harvey.
How do you do? Mine's Laura Jessen.
Mrs. or Miss?
Mrs.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How's the eye?
Perfectly all right. Fred. I had lunch with a strange man today and he took me to the movies.
Good for you. You know what's happened, don't you?
Yes, I do.
I've fallen in love with you.
Yes, I know.
Tell me honestly. Please tell me honestly if what I believe is true.
What do you believe?
That it's the same with you. That you've fallen in love too.
Yes, it's true.
Laura.
No, please. We must be sensible. Please help me to be sensible. We mustn't behave like this.
Brief Encounter, released in 1945, based, as we said, on the Noel Coward play Still Life, starring Celia Johnson and Trevor Howard, and directed by the great David Lean, the first we are doing of his on the podcast. Our synopsis: the story of two married strangers living in pre-World War II England, whose chance meeting at a railway station leads to a brief yet intense emotional affair, disrupting their otherwise conventional lives. And I think that's very important, that one of those final words in this, conventional, because these are very ordinary people, very middle class, in a former era in Britain, obviously set in the mid-30s, which I'd kind of forgotten about, its actual period setting. There's no mention of war or any kind of world situation going on here. But we start in this station cafe, and which is actually set in the northwest of England, but there's no accents whatsoever here on the show at all.
No, even the kind of the working class characters are more like Cockney.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't get any real focus mentioned around the area at all, really, other than a few odd town names. But yeah, so we get this early scene of Laura Jesson, played by Celia Johnson, and Dr. Alec Harvey. And how would you describe in the way they are sat, and what did you make of this first scene as they are interrupted quite rudely and abruptly by one of Laura's so-called acquaintances?
Yeah, I guess at first the very first scene is more focused on the staff in the cafe, and these two characters are kind of just sat in the corner of the frame having quite an intense conversation, but you can't hear it. And then with the arrival of Dolly, we are then suddenly given access to these characters. And I think it's very clear that particularly Laura is very upset or has just received very distressing news. That's the kind of vibe she gives off.
I think we already get an early feeling into the subtle emotions at play here, because we can already tell that a serious conversation has taken place,
and that Dolly has
completely interrupted it. Alec particularly is very keen to not show any emotion here and to introduce himself to her, shake her hand.
Well, he's just doing the polite
it's all
thing,
about,
isn't
it's
he?
about very much of this movie is about maintaining face, isn't it? And that's an ongoing theme throughout, and we see this in the first scene because I think Laura is really, really saddled with the constant annoyance of maintaining face to her acquaintances, particularly the female acquaintances that she meets in various parts of the film as this affair is taking place.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's a constant theme throughout. But they're obviously departing, and they're saying farewell.
But still trying to maintain this like polite, friendly distance when clearly Alec is a stranger to Dolly. Dolly knows Laura's husband. They clearly come from the same kind of small town community. So Dolly is kind of making light-hearted jokes about telling Laura's husband that she's seen her with this handsome doctor.
Yeah.
And I think even as an audience, you're instantly aware of Laura's kind of discomfort with the whole conversation. We
already can tell from the body language that there's more to Laura and Alec here than simple acquaintances. That there's definitely a lot of tension and pain under the surface, because they're saying goodbye to each other, but we just don't know the full backstory
and the focus on Alec like touching her shoulder.
Yeah, and it's just very subtle shot focuses of the camera, but particularly the facial expressions, which are just masterful throughout. Incredible, particularly on Celia Johnson's part, and just how subtle and nuanced these emotions can be portrayed, particularly through the eyes, and that's what really, really makes this film for me. But they go off and have their own conversation, Dolly and Laura, on the train.
Well, actually, before that happens, Laura runs out of the room.
She does, yeah, and we hadn't seen what caused her to run out, had we?
No, and we don't ever have access to the platform at that point. We're only seeing the inside of the cafe, and then Laura comes back in, looking like she's about to kind of collapse, and she tells Dolly she's going to be sick.
Yeah, I mean, she looks more physically ill by this point, doesn't she? She looks very dishevelled.
Yeah.
But again, there's no explanation in this early scene as to what caused that. And of course, to Dolly, she maintains face and brushes it off.
Yeah.
So they go off, and eventually they do get on the train.
Yeah, and she goes home to her husband and 2 children. And I think it's clear the marriage she has with her husband is clearly it's not a passionate marriage, but they're clearly very kind of comfortable with one another. Like, it's kind of a very comfortable companionship that they have, and they're used to the routines of what he like settles down and does a crossword while she sews.
Yeah, and I think we're going to draw comparisons to different things we've seen in the past, based around affairs, and the shame of affairs, but things from different eras. You know, I mean, we watched Bridges of Madison County, and you kind of have that interesting relationship with Meryl Streep's character and the husband in that film, because that spans through time, doesn't it? And you see, I think the husband pass away towards the end, and you kind of get this respectful love that's insinuated, and I think you can paint the
duty, isn't it?
Dutiful love.
In Bridges of Madison County, it's duty, and it's all wound up in the duty you feel as a wife and a mother, and it's complicated and it's painful. But also in Bridges of Madison County, you instantly feel sorry for her as a character, because you think how unhappy her home life really is. Like, she is walked all over as a mother, and so you're kind of like on her side from the beginning. But it's more complicated with Laura because she doesn't have an unhappy home life.
No, she doesn't, not at all. And her husband is extremely respectful of her, but in that very old-fashioned way, you know, of just being very distant.
Yeah, it's all very like, as I said, there's like no passion or real romance in the relationship.
Most of the commentary and the dialogue between them is incredibly trivial. You know, it's very much based around what's on the crossword that evening. You know, and then the conversation is like, this woman is dying for more emotion in her life.
He's like, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling unwell. Why don't you come and sit on this chaise longue and help me with my crossword? Yeah. Like, that's his solution to the problem, is I'll even let you help me with the crossword. So exactly. He's clearly not he's not very emotionally intelligent as a character, because he isn't picking up on the obvious kind of distress signals that she's giving off.
No, but I think it's very much, again, another thing of its era. You know, I think this was very common of marriages in those days, particularly British, I would say as well.
Well, it's interesting. They say something at one point about like Victorian marriages, and it just really shows how that really was still lingering, that idea of like middle class marriages being this kind of like quite duplicitous thing, where you're not really being honest to one another, but you're just doing it to save face, and it's all for the reputation and image of the family, and upholding that image. And
this is what becomes fascinating, because for a start, this is, I think, at least 10 years since I've seen it, and it's definitely, I think, at least my third or fourth watch, but I'd actually forgotten that there was children in this film, and that Laura and Fred had children.
Well, they're not in many scenes, are they? She doesn't really talk about them.
No, there's not much commentary around the children, or about because the guilt is far more based around Fred. But we obviously see the children in only one scene.
Two.
In one?
Two, because we see them that first night she comes back, when they're meant to be asleep and they're not, and she tucks them into bed and they go to sleep. But we also see them in part of the narrative when she comes back having spent her first proper day with Alec, and she thinks like God is punishing her because that's when her son is hit by a car and gets a concussion.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I think, as I said, I think that most of the commentary, because we're obviously now moving into a narrative formed by Celia Johnson that's in the form of almost a confession to Fred.
Yeah, it's like she's speaking to him for most of it.
But we're not sure whether it's in her head or whether it's going to be through a letter that she'll write or a confrontation she will plan with him. But we then use this narrative form to then go through the chronology of the full affair, from the very first time that Laura and Alec met to the very end of the affair, right up until the very first scene that we had seen in the station cafe when they bid farewell.
But this time all with Laura's narration and like monologue of what she's thinking at each stage.
To tell the story, how did you find this style to kind of take in the full development and emotion?
I mean, it's quite a simple narration in terms of its like framed narrative of starting at the end and then going back with character monologue. Like, that format is quite simple. In general, the film is quite simple in its storytelling.
Yeah, it is. What I love about it is it also paints, again, a very old-fashioned way of life. You know, she's essentially a housewife, isn't she? But she has a very kind of...
Yeah, you love that, don't you? That depiction.
She has a
You're like, I love it.
Well, it's gaining an insight into that way of life around that time, which sometimes the problem with a lot of old movies is they don't do that, is that, especially the limited setting ones, they don't give you too much context around how these characters supposedly live their lives. Mm-hmm. This one does, because it's showing Laura's routine almost, in that she visits this town, Milford, every week to do some shopping, and she goes to the cinema every afternoon, doesn't she?
Oh, she takes herself out for lunch at this restaurant.
Very extravagant.
Yeah, it's quite... I was thinking, how much money does this woman have?
Well, I think that's what the insinuation is. I would say, in these days, this is what's regarded as upper middle class. But I think there was far less of a label given to those class nuances.
It's clearly like her treat to herself as a stay-at-home mum, that every Thursday she takes herself, and when she's doing the shopping, she also treats herself to lunch and the matinee performance at the cinema before getting the train home at the exact same time every Thursday.
Yeah, it sounds a good routine to me. So yeah, she's on the train platform on one such outing, and she gets that bit of grit in her eye, as lifted, of course, from The Holiday. In one of the
lifted from The Holiday, or inspires
that in future obviously inspires The Holiday. I think we're getting a bit of deja vu watching this. But
he's no Jack Black.
But yeah, so she gets the dirt in her eye and has to run back into the cafe. Alec walks back in as a doctor, and so
sticks a bloody handkerchief in her eyeball. What's he doing? That doesn't seem hygienic.
There it strikes the association, doesn't it? So they introduce themselves to each other.
Well, it's very fleeting
it's fleeting. It's totally
fleeting. And they
fleeting.
don't introduce themselves to each other, because he then has to go and get his train. It's very quick, actually, that first meeting. They barely even look at one another properly, because then he has to get the train, and then they run into each other the following Thursday, I think it is, at outside of the chemist, outside of the Boots.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's very fleeting, and I think she just says thank you.
Yeah.
And
then the third brief meeting is one that becomes not so brief, is that she's in that same restaurant in the town,
and it's
Milford.
Really busy, so she's
it's so busy. She's sat down there, and Alex walking around trying to find somewhere to sit, and spots her and says hello, and there he is sitting down having lunch with her. And this is the first meeting where they really get to know each other, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And Alex is talking about his work at the hospital and says that he actually happens to have an afternoon off and would also like to go to the movies and catch something.
Yeah, he is definitely the one that's kind of
pushing this forward.
Yeah. And like extending their... I'm not calling it a date, because it's not a date, but extending their time together. And he's the one kind of pushing, saying, can I come to the cinema with you? And
well, I think that's the first kind of slightly jarred reaction from Celia Johnson, in the sense of, oh, like, would there be any questions about me being seen out with another man who's not my husband? Because it's almost like going to the cinema with a man is automatically worse than sat down having lunch with someone else.
But there's still something that's very kind of like friendly. It does
completely. Yeah, it still takes its time, doesn't it, to develop this romance. Mm-hmm. I would say at this point, Laura is the far more uneasy one, but I think Alec is the one who's kind of asking her questions and opening up. And by this point, they're almost getting into routine of enjoying spending time together on a Thursday, doing some kind of activity, and they're walking through the park, I think, in one scene, and then they decide to take a little boat and row out across the river on a pleasant afternoon. And they come up upon a bridge, because Alex said he's not a rower at all, and hadn't seen this bridge come up, and has to push the boat away so that they can move it and pull away. And he essentially almost falls out of the boat
Well, he ends up in the water.
Yeah, and whether it's a deliberate plan or not, we don't know. But that leads to a scene where they have to go and dry off in what looks like a barn or something, isn't it?
It's the guy who owns the boat.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's the guy who'd rented them the boat.
Yeah. So it's like a boathouse.
The boathouse, and they're drying off, and this leads to the first kind of intense declaration of anything here, really. And Alex says to her, you know what's happening here, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Laura, by that point, almost can sense it coming. She is almost aware of the spark they have.
Yeah.
And the feelings they have to one another.
And then after that is when they share they have their first kiss, don't they? It's in like the subway bit of the train station that goes between the platforms.
Yeah.
In the shadows with all the posters and everything on the wall.
Yeah, and I like that because we're getting some great shadowy cinematography here. Very much reminiscent of a different kind of genre, and films that we'll talk about with The Third Man. But I love some of the black and white filming in this, and I think it definitely makes for it fits the mood of the piece because it's not a colourful romance. It's a romance that's very much shrouded in unease, anxiety, and also the shame, sordidness, and the kind of awareness that it just can't lead to anything permanent.
Yeah. And it's really from that point then that I think Laura's paranoia about people finding out escalates.
Exactly.
And they have a few more meetings, and one of the meetings they have is on their Thursday meet is in the restaurant, and they have clearly had champagne and been a bit, I think they almost become...
They're starting to become a little bit more careless as well.
Yeah, because they're so used to seeing each other and getting away with it, they almost forget themselves on a Thursday. It's like they're living in a different world.
Because they've been caught up in the romance and the glee of it all.
And when... I don't know if he's gone to the toilet or something, but Laura's waiting for him after having the meal, and she sees these two women leaving the dining room knows them, and she thinks, oh God, like, they must have seen us in there having quite like a...
intense conversation.
Yeah.
He'd actually gone to the entrance of the restaurant because he'd hired a car.
Is that his friend's car who'd got the...
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think he'd hired the car as a surprise for Laura so they could go off to the country driving for the afternoon.
He's borrowed it off of her friend, hasn't he?
Yeah. And it's at that point that Laura's left alone and realises across the foyer that the two female friends had obviously seen them. And then they're faced with the conversation, which kind of goes back to that awkwardness of facing up to acquaintances, of them being seen out in public together.
Well, basically, they end up going to the countryside and have kind of an intense... They have a kiss on this bridge in the countryside. And
the bridge.
It's clear Laura's very shaken and upset by their bubble being burst in the restaurant back in the town. And it does feel like there's a moment where it's like, do they go forward? They're on a precipice, basically. Do they go forward and commit to the affair? Or do they stop now? And it does seem they're at this kind of precipice where Laura is trying to like backpedal and Alec is like willing to push forward. Because when they return to London, or not London, Milford, and they're too late, he's missed his train, and this is the moment of the film, I think, where the kind of like the sexual tension is probably at its highest point. Because he is saying, like, I'm going to stay at my friend's flat, come with me.
Yeah. So they're insinuating that he is willing to sleep with her on that night because he's got this free flat from his friend. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think the guilt is very much overlapping with the sordidness of the affair. And it's too much initially for Laura to kind of think about and to accept. Mm-hmm. But that's why she at first goes to the train station.
She gets on the train.
She does, yeah. And great, like, just direction of this scene, because I think we as the viewer, as a first-time viewer, are convinced that she's going to just run away from that kind of situation and go with it. And she makes the excuse to the strangers, who don't know her at all, that she has forgotten something. And she gets out as the train is literally moving.
I think it's just, otherwise she'd look insane if she just jumped off of the train as it was moving off.
Yeah.
So she just makes some feeble...
Yeah. So she runs back to the flat to meet Alec, and she's obviously got to run through a storm almost. And she's only been in there about 10 or 15 seconds, and it's bad timing on their part because Alec's friend has walked in.
I found that conversation with his friend really strange, because it's almost like his friend is like almost proud of him in a weird way, and then he's like, give me my keys back. And he's like, I'm just disappointed. And I'm like,
I did find it odd.
This seedy guy. It's clear that this guy is probably like, this is his like bachelor pad, where it's never said if even the friend is married.
A lot of it is very unsaid, and Alec's relationship with other men and friends. How open is he to this kind of thing? Does he talk about it? Is he open?
But I found it strange that the friend is like, I'm just disappointed.
And I think Laura's part, because she's essentially been hidden and been thrown out in the rain to hide from Alec's friend, who's come back. And by this point, the sordidness and the shame of it has totally overwhelmed her, and she literally wanders the streets for 3 hours in the rain. And there's this great shot of her running across the street, isn't there? In the rain, just totally by that point lost. And then she sat on the bench late at night, and this police officer walks up to her asking questions how she is, and out of concern. And I think it's one of those things that is another thing that just makes the film feel so like old fashioned in Britishness, because it's almost humiliation by this point.
Does he find her again that night? Is it at the station? Because when does he tell her that he's going to take a new job?
So she goes back into the cafe, and it's very late by that point, and there's only the younger girl behind the bar, and she orders a brandy from there and is intending to write him a letter to end it totally. And he walks back in. Alec walks back into the cafe and says, "Thank God I found you."
Yeah.
And by this point, they're very much talking about whether they can continue this or not, or whether they have to end it. And they walk out of the station, and says that he's had a job offer to be a doctor in South Africa, and can he do the honour of meeting one more time next Thursday, so they can essentially just spend one more day together.
Yeah.
Very much in line with their normal routine.
And by that point, we really looped. Once we see them spend one more day together, we've really looped back to the beginning. But this time we have Laura's commentary.
But also thinking about what Alec is actually saying to her, he is willing to do whatever she says. Like if Laura is willing to give up her family, then he is willing to give up his.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, he says it. He says, "I'll do whatever you say." So the final scene in the railway car after following their final day, we obviously get this circular part of it that we've already seen how this scene ends. But what did you make of the final scene and how it builds up and how the conversation flows up until that point? And also the missing gap that we'd seen with her breakdown almost, and with her, there's almost something that manifests almost like a panic attack.
Yeah, but I think the insinuation is she's going to jump, because she says to him she wants to die.
Yeah.
And I think the insinuation is that she just misses the train coming through, which is, I think, the same train that must have come through right at the beginning that put the grit in her eye. It's like this train that doesn't stop, it just goes through the station, so it comes through very fast.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've seen the whole scene play out again from the beginning with Dolly, but this time we have Laura's commentary, and then this moment where she seems to feel like the world is tilting underneath her, and probably the most progressive, clever shot of the film is the Dutch angle they use with the tilting frame to give the impression that she's like feeling unbalanced.
Yeah. I'd totally forgotten it, to be honest with you, and I thought it was fantastic, and a great technical touch from the director that will get a lot in future films. Very clever, because like I said to you at the time of watching it, you very rarely got very innovative, unusual shots with camera in this period, particularly in British films.
I guess really that scene's up for interpretation, because I interpreted it as that she was going to jump, But it could be that she's also trying to run after him.
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely see how that you could interpret it that way. Absolutely.
But he's gone. I don't know. It's really up for interpretation, that.
Because I think she's so emotionally broken in that very moment. She's almost probably not thinking logically.
No, and I think the angle kind of reflects that, how there's something kind of unstable about her.
And actually, I kind of had another flashback actually to that scene where she almost goes to jump on the platform. The camera is very close to her face, and she looks so dishevelled, more dishevelled than any other part in the film.
Oh yeah, her hair's all over her.
I got very much flashbacks to Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, what, on the bridge?
Not on the bridge, on the scene where he runs back from the house when he just met his mother in a future life.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very close, intense camera shot on someone's face.
Yes.
At their lowest ebb, you know.
He's running down the street, isn't he?
Yeah.
In the bit you're referring to.
Yeah. I think it's very similar. And obviously probably from the same year even, 1945. And as the scene and the film closes down, what did you make of the final moments with Laura and Fred?
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, we'll get to it, because I'm conflicted with this film. Well, not conflicted, I just don't... We watched a kind of a special feature on it, and they're saying that this moment is like really emotional when Fred says, "You've come back to me," when really he's just talking about her waking up from a dream. And everyone's saying how emotional that is. I don't really find it emotional. But
I'm not sure emotional is the right word. I find it extremely touching.
Yeah, see, I don't, but that's just because I don't really feel like the characters for me are developed enough for me to feel an emotional or touching, like an emotional attachment to them.
Yeah.
Whereas the scene in, and I know we're comparing it, but the scene in Bridges in Madison County when her husband dies on his deathbed and he says, "I know what you gave up for me." Oh my God, that makes me sob, because I have an emotional connection to the characters, and they go through a lifetime of repression and sacrifice for one another.
Yeah.
And that makes me sob, but this just doesn't hit in that way for me.
I guess because there's so much shame around having affairs in such an earlier era, so much more is left unsaid. People very rarely had divorces in this period. People very rarely even had or committed adultery, let alone admitted it to their partner. So everything is very much following that tone. Everything is left unsaid. Everything is withheld in terms of the honest truth and the way these characters are feeling. I like that it leaves you questioning what Fred really knows. I like that it leaves out in that note, but it gives it very appropriate dialogue to get you thinking more about it.
Yeah.
You almost want to know. I love films, and I always say this on the podcast, I love films that get you thinking about what you've not seen, what will entail the future with these characters. Because it's clear that Laura is at a crossroads in her life.
Yeah.
And is almost at an emotional breaking point. So I think it's very forward-thinking for its time period to show...
I get what you're saying when you've said that this will be one of the first films that depict an affair in this way. And I do respect that and what the film's doing, and I respect its legacy and the fact that it was doing this in 1945. I just think I just don't get the hype for it.
But I also would say, I think it's one of the first films that really delves into a female psychology. Especially of an old...
I don't think it does that.
How does it not do that?
Not in the way that Bridges of Madison County does.
Made in 1995?
No, but this is what I'm saying. For me, the limitations of this film is it feels undeveloped in its plot. The conversations they have are so incredibly shallow.
Yeah, I think at this point it's very unfair to compare it, because you have to think about its historical perspective.
I get that. I get what you're saying. I get that it's setting it in a time where it's all about repression and, you know, that they couldn't... But Madison County isn't set in 1995. It's set in the 50s.
No, but that period is set much further on when the characters are about to die. So that would have been 20 or 30 years later.
Yeah, I get that, but that's incomparable in terms of the stages of life that they're in.
But I also think that it feels much more international, that film, in terms of the emotions, because you're dealing with different cultures. Meryl Streep's character is Italian, and she's much more hot-blooded. there's nothing like the repression in that film that there is in this film. All of these characters are totally... Even Alec, who we may think in some scenes is totally forward, is not really. I mean, he's more withheld than any other male character I can think of in a film about affairs.
Yeah.
I think, possibly, I can't speak for you, but I feel like you have come into this film knowing of its great reputation.
No, see, I would disagree.
Tell me. Why did you disagree with that? You know how much I talk about this film.
But I haven't come into this film like wanting to nitpick and find weakness in it. I was fully open to enjoying and immersing myself in a great film. But I didn't feel like the conversations that the characters have. I didn't feel invested in the characters particularly because you don't get to know them. The conversations they have are so shallow.
No, I agree with that. It's definitely a film that has a lot of repetition, and it's a fairly short film.
And I also don't find it romantic. So this is what like Greta Gerwig has said, it's the most romantic film of all time. I wouldn't agree. I don't find it romantic.
I can't think of many other films that are more romantic than this. I really can't. That have genuine pain and emotion within them. Bridges of Madison County, definitely, but not many others.
You don't have to have pain for it to be romantic.
But that's the problem. I think romance is a interpretive term, and what you deem romantic, I think for you, can only mean happiness. I think we're getting on to deep...
Says my boyfriend.
I think we're getting on to deep
I'm
topics.
so glad you find true romance in pain.
Well, in terms of emotion and storytelling, yes, absolutely. Because it shouldn't all be happy
I'm not
Larry.
saying it should all be happy, but there has to be like
So why does
some.
So what in The Holiday, for example? Why does the scenes of admission of adultery and cheating, why does it come across so much more tacky in that than it does in this? There's a reason.
That's where your position though as the characters and who you like.
There's a reason, and that The Holiday is going for comedy in those scenes. Those scenes where Kate Winslet is throwing stuff at.
It's not Kate Winslet. It's Cameron Diaz throwing stuff at Ethan.
No, Kate Winslet when she is having a go at Jasper for coming back.
Yeah.
What's the actor? Jasper Bloom.
Yeah, I can't remember the actor.
When she's having a go at him, and it's all still wrapped up in comedy. It's almost screwball-esque. There's nothing romantic about it, really.
No, but that's completely different because the central characters, the romance you're meant to be getting behind, are not having an affair. We're positioned against Jasper. Jasper is the antagonist of the film, so we're not supporting the affair. We don't want the affair to happen because he's the antagonist. That's completely different.
Yeah,
comparison with Brief Encounter.
I would love you to tell me 3 more romantic films than this.
In the Mood for Love.
That's a good one about affairs, definitely. And I think there is.
Even think, and I didn't love this film, but I even think that An Affair to Remember is more romantic than this. Not An Affair to Remember, the one with
The End of the Affair.
The End of the Affair. I even think that's more romantic than this.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. No,
and that's got pain in it.
That's a good film, but I wouldn't say it has anything like the emotion that this film does.
Yeah, completely different.
I think it's far more fleeting, like in terms of what you actually get to know behind them, because there's a lot about the friends in that's more developed, and the period setting. That's a good film. That I did like The End of the Affair, but I don't think it reaches the depths. But I think there's so much about the historical perspective as well. Like, this is a very 1930s film because that's what Noel Coward wrote it in that period from the play. And that's why it really has stood the test of time. There's a reason that people won't be talking about The End of the Affair in 75 years' time. Or other movies. In the Mood for Love is one of the best international movies I've ever seen. And on a technical level, it's like stunning, as we said in our podcast. But it's an interesting one to compare in terms of the emotions of the affair and the shame of it. I would definitely compare it to this. I personally didn't find it more romantic, but that I would definitely accept that. That's just my interpretation. Being British, maybe.
I am also British.
Yeah. Maybe it's because I watch more old British movies than you.
Maybe.
And I feel like this is a film that reflects British upper middle class society more perfectly.
Give me
than
Bridget
ever.
Jones any day, upper middle class society.
All right. Well, I think we've pretty much summed up how we feel on that.
We haven't talked about all of the B plot characters of the working class characters, which I find a complete waste of time in the film.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did mean to ask you about this because this is really where you get all the Noel Coward stuff. This is what the comedy elements that he tries to bring in that is all wrapped up in the play, that is almost more dominant in the play.
Yeah. And more funny. I didn't find it funny. I didn't find it. I thought it was a complete waste of time in the film to have it even there.
I mean, I think it adds to the charm.
Well, why are these random soldiers coming in and then them like getting kicked out? I was like, well, that was a waste of 5 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like you could definitely have without it, but I think it does add to the charm. And I love the actors involved. I love Stanley Holloway as the ticket inspector, but again, I think it's probably down to the fact I'm more aware of him.
You know the actors. It's like cameo spotting almost.
Do you think,
like enjoying?
I don't know this, but maybe it was because at the time audiences would have found it quite heavy going if it was just
especially at the end
pure
of the war.
romance at the end of the war. Yeah,
but I found that an interesting depiction of soldiers, considering it was the end of the war.
Well, yeah, I mean, soldiers.
They're vile, the soldiers.
Soldiers are up for a bit of slap and tickle, really. I think that's what it's showing, and that was very much kind of commented on in the 50s films.
Tickle.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're after. They're trying to take Myrtle out, aren't they? But I love the character of Myrtle.
Sometimes I feel like I'm dating like a 90-year-old.
Well, how would you describe the soldiers? Lecherous?
Pervy.
I mean, I liked it, but I feel like the film could do without it. But I feel like it's just an interesting side plot amongst it all. And I like the character of Dolly. I think she's very funny. But it's almost like Hyacinth Bouquet acting. It's so class driven. Mm-hmm. Like she's so uppity and wanting to be viewed as a respectable woman, Myrtle. And I remember that from the play.
Yeah, because I think she was stood very close in front of us from where we were sat when we watched the play.
Right, well, let's talk about some of the trivia behind the film because it's fascinating. So much of the filming took place at Carnforth Railway Station, which is, I looked it up, I had to check, it's right up in the north of Lancashire, in the northwest of the country. Noel Coward himself provided the station announcements in the film. The actual refreshment room in the station was a studio set. Carnforth Station also retains many of the period features now from the time of filming. And it's become a pilgrimage for fans of the film. There's a lot of visitors throughout the year who pay respects to it. And as I said, a lot of the shots in the town were filmed in Denham, which is in Buckinghamshire, also in Beaconsfield as well, that's near where Denham Studios was. The country bridge that they visit twice is called Middlefell Bridge, which is at Dungeon Gill in Cumbria, in the Lake District. The original choice for Alec, in terms of casting, was one of Izzy's favourite British actors of the 1940s. Any guesses?
No clue.
Roger Livesey.
Oh, I love Roger Livesey.
Yeah, he would have been interesting to see in this role. But David Lean chose...
Oh, he would have been so much better.
Yeah, but Lean chose to cast Trevor Howard after seeing him in a film, the Talking Picture Show a lot, called The Way to the Stars. And in 1999, the BFI ranked Brief Encounter as the second greatest British film of all time.
What's it behind?
Good question. I would have assumed it may be behind Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh.
In terms of greatest British films of all time. I would assume that the BFI would put that above it.
Yeah, no, it's not Lawrence of Arabia, it's The Third Man.
Wow. I couldn't respect that
Lawrence
more.
of Arabia is third.
Wow.
And then The 39 Steps, and then Great Expectations.
The BFI ranked 39 Steps, the original, as the fourth best.
Fourth.
That is incredible.
Kind Hearts and Coronets, Cares at number 7, Don't Look Now at 8.
Love it. Brilliant. Now, there's another bit of trivia that I found. It's kind of an overlap between the general production trivia and the awards. Robert Altman, who directed many great films in the 70s, The Player being one that we've watched in the 90s.
Love The Player.
His wife, Catherine Altman, said, "One day, years and years ago, just after the war, Robert had nothing to do and he went to a theatre in the middle of the afternoon to see a movie. Not a Hollywood movie, a British movie. He said the main character was not glamorous, not a babe, And at first, he wondered why he was even watching it. But 20 minutes later, he was in tears, and he'd fallen in love with her. And it made him feel it wasn't just a movie. That film was Brief Encounter. It's definitely held its mark, I think we can say, amongst people in the business, but actors, critics, and the movie-going public. There is definitely a reason why this film has endured for so long, because it's reflecting on the non-glamorous elements of society. There is nothing glamorous about these characters. It's always there.
No.
And I love that, and it was so rare for that day, for that period. I can't think of many big films that had kind of ordinary-looking characters.
Mm.
In terms of awards, the movie was released 2 years before the BAFTA started, so no recognition there. At the Oscars, Brief Encounter was nominated for Best Screenplay. Celia Johnson was nominated for Best Actress, and David Lean was nominated for Best Director, but unfortunately came away with nothing. That year, Olivia de Havilland won Best Actress for To Each His Own, and William Wyler won Best Director for The Best Years of Our Lives. So let's talk about the cast. We have to talk about Celia Johnson. It's her film for me. What did you think, Iz?
She's definitely the queen of like wide-eyed, haunted looks. A lot of her kind of acting in this is just like stare off into the distance with big wide eyes and look traumatized.
Yeah, so you weren't that struck on it?
No, I think I agree. She's the best thing about the film.
For me, I think it's one of the all-time leading performances from an older British actress, I would say. You have to say it's up there. I can't think of many greater ones. Fascinating actress to look at. She was very much had a history in the stage in the 20s, late 20s, I'd say, and by the early 40s, David Lean was starting to use her in his early films, like This Happy Breed and In Which We Serve, which was also written with Noel Coward. But as she grew older, she didn't appear in many films, but the ones she did were always memorable. Like one I've got on the list, which is a Christmas film called The Holly and the Ivy. She's in that. And such a sweet movie called A Kid for Two Farthings, which I've also got on the list, which is very much around the East End markets of that period, which has a wonderful cast list as well. She was also in A Prime of Miss Jean Brodie as well, with Maggie Smith, which she won a BAFTA for as Best Supporting Actress. But in this movie, she was 38 years old.
Yeah, she seems older. She seems like she's in her 40s, but then I think
Everyone did.
Everyone in those days just looked older.
Yeah, and interestingly, she was married to Ian Fleming's brother, Peter Fleming, who was also a writer and very high up in the Secret Service.
Well, it's her daughters that are now in charge of the whole Fleming estate. Correct. Because I don't think Ian Fleming had children. Why would his nieces be in charge of the estate?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Unless he had children, they've died.
Trevor Howard as Dr. Alec Harvey. What did you think of this performance?
Yeah, he's not a classic romantic lead, but I know that's kind of the point. But I think he is part of why I don't find it an incredibly romantic film. I know that's kind of what he's going for, is this kind of stiff performance of like upper class gentleman. But I think he's kind of the reason why I don't find it necessarily that romantic. And everyone's going, oh, he's very nice looking. I'm like, is he?
No, I don't think he is a classically good-looking character, but for the same reasons as Celia Johnson, I think that's why he was cast in this role. I worked out that he was 32 years old in this film, so there was a 6-year age gap between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of Trevor Howard, it was his third movie role. But this movie obviously, understandably, shot him to leading man status, and he then became known as really the kind of steady upper middle class gentleman type. But as he grew older, in a lot of those films, he could always play characters with a real angry or neurotic edge to them, or the ones that had like a short fuse always. And that's why he was always in authority roles, like playing army officers. We've seen him before the podcast in playing Major Calloway in The Third Man, which of course we had to come back and cover. He was in Green for Danger with Alistair Sim around this period as well, which is on the list. But there are some big films that he had supporting roles in, like Around the World in 80 Days, Von Ryan's Express, which is a cracking movie, Battle of Britain, and even much older, he was in 80s films like Gandhi and White Mischief.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be seeing him again, absolutely. We've got to talk about some of the other actors involved with that kind of B-movie plot and some of the more comedic elements of the film. Stanley Holloway as Albert the Ticket Inspector. Well, huge reputation if you read about Stanley Holloway. If you very musically talented as well. He was a comedic actor who had strong stage roots in British musical theatre in the 20s. And by the 30s, he was very much on demand in variety, musical comedy and reviews. And David Lean started to use him in these early 40s films that often had war themes, like The Way Ahead, which is a great film with David Niven, which I've got on the list. And then Ealing started to use him more in the period after this, in their comedy films like Passport to Pimlico, The Lavender Hill Mob, which is fantastic. And then much later in his career, he was cast as Alfred Doolittle in My Fair Lady, if we ever cover that. Great actor, and his son became a supporting actor in the Carry On films as well. So next is Joyce Carey as Myrtle, the cafe owner. Very memorable performance, I would say. It's definitely a character that's always talked about whenever Brief Encounter is mentioned. She was an English stage actress whose career had started in 1916, and she had a huge body of work in Shakespeare and Noel Coward work on stage. We'll see her again if we ever covered In Which We Serve by David Lean, and Blythe Spirit as well, another war film. The only other one I wanted to mention was a non-speaking role. Do you remember the two ladies spotted playing the cellist in the restaurant?
They're laughing at, yeah.
Yeah, and then they spot one of the ladies in the cinema as well playing the organ.
Yes.
That's a lady called Irene Handel. Now, anyone who knows anything about British film history loves and adores her because she went on to be one of the very, very popular supporting older comedic actresses who always had very memorable parts in all of the Carry On films and various Ealing comedies and Rank films. She was in so much. She had probably one of the longest filmographies you can imagine. But I think in this early part of her career, she had a lot of non-speaking roles, as like in between being an extra and just a supporting actor. Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely be seeing her again. We've also got to talk about David Lean. Yeah, an absolute titan of cinema history and one of the most important British directors we'll talk about on the podcast. Fascinating life. Started off as a film editor in the 30s before he made In Which We Serve with Noel Coward, which was his obviously directorial debut. Brief Encounter was his fourth movie, and then he went on to direct some of cinema's greatest epics that are definitely some of the most highly rated and respected films from not only British movie history but Hollywood history as well, like The Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, all of course ones we'll cover, so we'll definitely be talking about in the future. He continued to make hugely respected work until his last film in 1984, which was A Passage to India. I also saw that he won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography more than any other director in cinema history, with 5 wins out of 6 nominations for Great Expectations, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, and Ryan's Daughter. And his last nomination was A Passage to India. So, in terms of the bigger picture, I think we can definitely say he's one of the most influential directors of all time.
Well, it's interesting. Brief Encounter is tiny compared to like the epic of Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge over the River Kwai.
Which is why it's all the more admirable, I think, because it's a far more intimate film about a totally different type of subject. It's not an epic. It's not based around, not really around the war at all. It's a romantic film. You may not agree, but it's not an epic in any way, is it? But you get those wonderful touches of very innovative camera techniques in this, but it's not overdone in any way. Mm-hmm. So he's not my favourite director of all time, but I would definitely put him up there as one of the most important ones of all time. So what was your final rating is?
Okay, I said that I can respect it for being an iconic kind of post-war British romantic drama. I said that it was kind of infused with the kind of infatuation, yearning and repression. I said that there was some wonderfully progressive cinematography, particularly in the final scenes with the Dutch angle and use of close-up. And I think that Celia Johnson is the standout, and particularly for her use of kind of that haunted look she kind of masters throughout the whole film. But I do struggle with this film in terms of, it's a very dialogue-heavy film, and yet I feel like the dialogue never really goes anywhere. It all feels quite repetitive because you're just seeing them live out the same day over and over every Thursday, just doing the same routine. And I just feel like their dialogue never goes anywhere, so I don't feel like emotionally connected to the characters.
But we've definitely watched much more dialogue-heavy films than this. This is almost quite middle of the road in terms of the intensity of the dialogue.
Yeah, but it's not like there's loads of action in it. So a lot of the time it's just kind of watching them in the cinema and watching them in the restaurant or walking over the bridge or whatever they're doing, or on the train platform or in the cafe. And then the dialogue we do have, I never feel really goes particularly anywhere. And I know that's kind of the point. Like, it's the repression. Like, they can never really go into the detail of how they feel about one another. But for me, that's what limits it from being... because romance is subjective. And for me, my idea of romance is not talking about it.
Even in 1945?
Yes, even in 1945. Because I'm still watching it in 2026.
But
I can't...
You're failing to actually...
No, I'm not failing anything. I accept that it was doing lots for the time period it's set in, and that it was progressive, given that this was released in 1945, which is why I'm giving it 4 stars, because I respect that. But it's not a film that I enjoyed.
So you accept that you're seeing it through a 2025 lens?
2026, yes.
Yeah.
But it's not a film I enjoyed.
No.
I found parts of it quite a struggle to get through, because I did. I'm just being honest. I know you don't have to like it. I've given it 4 stars because I respect it.
I'm so surprised. I am more surprised about this than any film that you've disliked from like old great ones.
I am not saying I dislike it. I'm just saying that I struggled with parts of it, and I didn't find it romantic like everyone else says.
There we go. You can't like them all, but you've still given it 4 stars out of all of that.
Yeah, because I respect it.
But you can talk much more about what you dislike about it than what you do like about it.
Yeah, but I respect it.
Yeah. Well, I think me and you are just totally different on this, too, and this is what we have to accept on the podcast, absolutely. Because I think it's just one of the greatest on-screen romances ever portrayed. Not only one of the most enduring British films, but one of the greatest films of all time. Definitely would put it. That's why I've given it 5 stars. But it just feels so quintessentially English. It's more English than any other film, I would say, particularly from this era. And Celia Johnson, again, I'll give it all the superlatives I can. Celia Johnson delivers one of the most affecting performances from an older female actress, I think. And I really, really respect it being an early film from David Lean's work, but you get some of those wonderful kind of auteur touches and some wonderful lighting here and facial close-ups. Ronald Neame, who was a producer on this film, said on that documentary that you can't really appreciate Brief Encounter until you've watched it 3 times. So there's Izzy's homework. Why don't we take a break and we'll be back with what Izzy can give us to follow this up.
There's your train.
Yes.
You mustn't miss it.
No.
What's the matter?
Nothing at all, really.
It's been so very nice. I've enjoyed my afternoon enormously.
I'm so glad. So have I. I apologize for boring you with long medical words.
I feel dull and stupid not to be able to understand more.
Shall I see you again?
It's the other platform, isn't it? You'll have to run. Don't bother about me. Mine's not due for a few minutes.
Shall I see you again?
Yes, of course. Perhaps you'll come out to Ketchworth one Sunday. It's rather far, I know, but we should be delighted.
Please.
What is it?
Next Thursday, the same time.
No, I couldn't possibly.
Please. I ask you most humbly.
You'll miss your train.
All right.
Run.
Goodbye.
I'll be there.
Right, is Brief Encounter done, ticked off. That was your 40s British romance for you. So where are you going to take us now on the podcast?
I'm going to say what decade I'm taking you to, and you are not. Your instant reaction is going to be, oh God.
Okay, so let's go into clues. So is it a film we talked about much before?
We've talked about it, not a lot, because neither of us have seen it.
Okay, good. So is it British or American or international?
It's American.
It's American. And what period are we talking about?
What, that it's set in or when it was released?
No, I think released. We'll stick with that.
It was released in the early 80s.
Oh, okay. Maybe some clues around genre for the listeners?
Genre, I believe a war film.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this. Is it Sophie's Choice?
It is Sophie's Choice.
Wow, Sophie's Choice, eh?
I saw your brief encounter and I erased you.
Yeah.
Well, no, because there are two reasons that over the course of this episode of recording I've gone for it. Because at the beginning of the episode, I had no idea what I was going to do. Two reasons. One, we've spent a lot of time just talking about Bridges of Madison County again and Meryl Streep. And I know Sophie's Choice is held up as one of her, if not her, kind of definitive role. As a serious, in more of her serious roles.
I think I read that it's one of the most awarded films in terms of acting.
And we've also been watching what's his name? A YouTuber called The Awards
Contender. Who, if ever people consume a lot of history and interest in film media, I would definitely recommend The Awards Contender on YouTube. He does incredible archiving of the Oscar history. A lot of devotion to particular award ceremonies, but also actors who've missed out on awards throughout their careers and actors who've won awards. And it's very interesting, so I would definitely recommend it.
You watched a video recently where he was talking about his definitive list of winners of all time.
Yeah.
And didn't he put Meryl Streep, Sophie's Choice at number 1?
I think so. I think from memory, it was definitely in the top 5. I think he did go Meryl Streep, but a lot of people do. A lot of people say that it's Meryl Streep's greatest performance. It was definitely in the period when she was doing all of her greatest films, like French Lieutenant's Woman. And then she did great films that are very underrated, like Heartburn and films like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Sophie's Choice won a lot of awards at the Oscars. Didn't win Best Picture.
Off the mic, I said, you've got two choices, really serious or not so serious. and so we went for this one. And we know it's going to be a
war epic.
It's a war epic. It's a bit of a
and it's been a while. It's been a while since we've done a heavy war film as well.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Because my other choice was going down a route that would be similar to one we've already done this year. So at least this is very different.
Great, yeah, and another appearance on the podcast from Meryl Streep. I think it will probably be her third after Little Women and Bridges of Madison.
Of course,
County.
She's in Little Women. She plays the aunt, doesn't she?
I will check that because she has popped up in a lot of supporting appearances in other movies we've seen. So. Great. Looking forward to that. It'll be a big one to tick off for us. We'll leave it there for now. So we've been Couple Indemnity, and you can find us on all good platforms for your podcast, including Apple and Spotify. Any recommendations or feedback for the podcast can be left on coupleindemnity@gmail.com. We're on all the socials. You can just search us on @coupleindemnity. And as I said on the previous episode, our episodes are also being uploaded to YouTube as well in audio form. So join us next week for a little bit of her and a little bit of me and a little bit of Meryl Streep as well with Sophie's Choice.
Just a little bit.
See you next week, guys.
Bye, guys.